Hi, you're listening to Baachu Talk, a podcast for facilities and workplace services professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundaram, and I'll be sitting down with our industry leaders to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the FM industry. Today's guest is Debra Ward. Debra is a true entrepreneur, having led, started, and sold several businesses across 3 continents, starting out at just 16. Currently, Debra leads and owns Live, Love, Learn Consulting, and have just finished a chart-topping year with ISS as their global head of transition and transformation, where she added new service lines, locations, significant review to the benefit of the clients and companies alike. Debra's entrepreneurial drive has seen her take the helm of several companies, including Camm Hooper, who were awarded a 25-year lease to run events at the iconic Battersea Power Station, representing an $800 million value. JLL leading human experience across EMEA region, Condeco, where under her leadership, sales rose year on year by 32%, and Macro, which her first year showed improved net results by 62%. Wow. In 2007, Debra and the team founded Mighty Client Services, which in only 5 years grew to 950 members nationally, delivering a turnover of £25 million. The company was named as one of the best small business companies to work for in Sunday Times Top 100 and received their coveted Special Training Award, along with the Supplier of the Year and Best Business Award. In 2019, Debra was named as one of the top 100 women to watch in hospitality, travel, and leisure, and Women of Achievement by Women in the City 2015, and one of the top 100 most influential women in her field by Ricks in 2017. Debra is passionate about giving back and has several philanthropic endeavors, including Refuge UK, the Passage, Macmillan Trust, Water Aid, and Action Aid. She's also supported actively with IWFM as the IWFM Chair of Women in FM, co-chairing Gender Balance for ISS, founding Mighty's Women for Work initiative, collaborator for May's Women, and providing mentorship over 40 young women. I don't know where to start, Debra, but welcome to Baachu Talk FM. Great to have you with us.
Baachu, I don't know if there's anything left to say. My gosh, that was quite a mouthful.
Exactly. Well, let's just talk through one at a time. But before we begin, Debra, talk about where were you born, and let's talk about your early life.
I was born in a small town in Canada, in Quebec, called Knowlton. It has a population of 2,500 people. So, I really got the sense when I was younger about that sense of community. And that was kind of ingrained. When you live in a town of 2,500 people, you kind of know everybody. And on top of that, my father owned the most successful bar and restaurant in all of the Eastern Townships. So everybody knew who we were. And people would come from Montreal and from America just to go to his establishment. So you get the sense of community, you get the sense of commitment, and you also get the sense of responsibility as the daughter of such an establishment. So, I mean, that was ingrained in me pretty young. I have 3 beautiful sisters. I'm the oldest of all of them. And the youngest 2 are actually identical twins. So, great dynamic. I had a very powerful, very entrepreneurial father. He bought the bar restaurant having never done it before. And I said, Daddy, why would you do that? We've got 4 young girls, and we lived in Toronto at the time in Canada, and we moved all the way to Quebec. I would think I was 6. And I said, why would you do that? Like the twins were only 2 at that point, or, just going on 2. I guess I was 7. And he said, it's every man's dream to own a bar. So he's very entrepreneurial. And then I've got this very strong mother with a great sense of ethics, or had a very strong mother with a great sense of ethics and morals and discipline, who was very forthright and very strong. And she was able to somehow manage the dual career back when that was still kind of not a big thing. But with 4 young people, she was a nurse in the emergency room. So yeah, I had a great start. I absolutely, one of the biggest challenges as a parent today is to be able to give, you always want to give your kids more than what you had, but I had it all. So it's kind of tough to beat.
Totally. What a beautiful start to your life. At what point in your life, so you did your schooling in Quebec and high school education there as well?
Yes, I did up to high school. And Quebec's a bit, Canada's different from here. We don't have sixth form in Canada. So we have something called Cégep in Quebec, which is 12 and 13, or kind of the higher end. And then you go to university for 4 years over there. So I did my university studies in Ontario, which is the next province over, and I studied hotel and food administration. It was a commerce degree specializing in hotel and food. But initially, what happened was my parents were like, you're going to go to school, you're going to get an education, you're going to do all kind of classic, middle income family type of behavior. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I really didn't want to go. So I went for a year and I bombed out because I just partied and I didn't really pay attention. And I bombed out and I had to leave school. Well, I didn't have to leave school. I chose to leave school because the marks weren't there. I wasn't interested. And I took two years out of school to discover what I wanted to do. And when I did discover what that was, and I wasn't aware that actually there was a commerce degree specializing in hotel and food, I was really dedicated to my studies after that. So, that was a big change for me. I mean, interestingly enough, when I went back, it was at the same university. And when I went back and they looked at my marks and they said, you're on academic sanction. And I said, well, what does that mean? I didn't understand what that meant. And they said, well, you can't get less than a C the entire 4 years you're here. You can't get a C the entire 4 years you're here. And I was like, oh my God, that was the highest mark I had my first time. How am I going to do that? I was terrified. But I ended up on the Dean's Honor List and I really put my mind to, what I was doing. And I still had to do a lot of stuff I didn't want to do, like sine, cos, and tan and math. Like who uses that today? I don't, but now there was a means to an end. So I realized in that moment, I was also a very pragmatic person.
Totally. Wow. What a journey. I think, a compelling event forced you to reinvent yourself as early as your graduation. But you managed to complete and score above C then, Debra?
Oh, I actually ended up on the Dean's Honor List. So, I mean, it was, it opened my eyes to what application and hard work can do. So I think prior to that, I was so afraid of failure that I thought, well, if I don't try and I fail, then I can blame it on the fact that I didn't try. Whereas if you try and fail, then it's kind of a wound that you have to deal with. So I wasn't applying myself before. And once I did apply myself, and really what I ended up doing was treating my university studies as a job. And so I was in the library from 9 to 5, if I was in a class, I was in a class, but if I wasn't in a class, I had to be in the library. And what that taught me also was it freed up my evenings, and it gave me some free time to think and I wasn't cramming the night before and I wasn't under crazy stress all the time. So it really taught me discipline around putting a plan in place and then working the plan. So again, some great early lessons in life.
Totally, Debra. It just makes me reflect on my graduate life where I was totally opposite to you. I just printed out the syllabus 3 days before the exam. And then it was always the last minute cramming. But yeah, I should have listened to you when I was young, but it's okay. So So yeah, successful completion of your degree. Then let's talk through what happened next, Debra. Is that where you relocated to the UK, or there was you worked in Canada before you came here?
I graduated from uni, and then what did I do after that? Oh yeah, then I had a series of roles. So I was one of 10 people across all of Canada to be accepted to management manager and training program for CP Hotels, which is now Fairmont Hotels. Mm-hmm. So some of the most iconic and historical hotels in all of Canada. There were only 10 of us across the whole country that were accepted. And we, I did a whole internship, entrepreneurship, which was really exciting. I then went on and ran a resort, all the food and beverage on a resort in Ontario. I did another one in Ontario. And then I was kind of done with that particular organization. And my father said to me, why don't you come home? He wanted to retire. He said, why don't you come home and help me? And so I did. Wow.
Coming back, running family business, how was it?
Have you worked in a family business before?
No, I'm a first stage entrepreneur. I'm really scared what my kids are going to do to it, provided it survives until then, but we will see.
Yeah, I mean, I started in my dad's business at 14. I was in the dish pit, really. Oh. So I got to know really young that if I wanted to get to know my father, I had to get to know his business. He was a workaholic. He was passionate about what he did. He loved customer service. He loved seeing an idea come to fruition. He loved the success of some of his ideas. He was a real pillar in the community. It brought people have kind of steered away from the church. And his pub became kind of the meeting place of the community, and everything was talked about, and people were there, and families came together. And so yeah, I mean, I started when I was really young. When I was 14, I was in the dish pit and I worked my way up. And you know how when you're the daughter of the owner, you have to prove that you're twice as good to be half as accepted, because everybody's like, oh, you only got this job because your dad owns it. So yeah, I worked my backside off, and I worked for him for a couple of years, and we had a very traumatic situation happen. So our whole kitchen brigade came from the same family. Right. So the mom made the pies, and the dad did steak nights, and the daughter ran the kitchen, and the other daughter worked days, and the other son worked the other days and some of the nights. And all of the family except for one, and one of them was quite a I don't know, he's a bit of a criminal. He was a drug dealer in Montreal. He got busted, and he rolled over one of the biggest drug lords in Montreal in order to save his own soul. And as it turned out, the family started to get death threats. And so they were meeting with the Wolverines, which is the undercover narcotics agency in Quebec. And so the head of the kitchen came to me and said, I need to go meet with the Wolverines. This is like the 4th or 5th meeting. And she said, can you just do the prep in the kitchen for me while I do this? And I was like, yes, of course. Now, in our hometown, the summer is the biggest season for tourism, and it's a small town, but it's also the playground to the rich and famous in Montreal. So we make all our money from May 2-4 weekend to the Labor Day weekend, which is the first weekend in September. And so this was in March. And March, April. And so I said, sure, I'll do your prep, no problem, blah, blah, blah. And then at 11:55, the ticker tape comes up, and she's not back. And I was like, okay. So it was like a croque monsieur and a pub burger or something. So I can do that, so I put it together, and then it was like a Caesar salad with chicken. And anyway, fast forward an hour and a half, and the ticker tape is on the floor, and the kitchen looks like a bomb shelter. And I'm like totally stressed out. And my mom, who did all the books at that time, comes downstairs, and she said, the worst has happened. I said, what do you mean the worst has happened? She said, they've all been relocated under the witness protection program effective immediately. And was like, what? And so the entire kitchen brigade was gone in like that, just before the month before our busiest season. So I ended up cooking for the entire summer. It took me, because everybody had jobs by that point. And of course, the labor pool in a town of that size is not the biggest. And so I ended up leading the kitchen brigade until July, August, before I could find another brigade. And yeah, it was and by the end of that, I was like, I can't be in customer service anymore. I'm done. I was stressed out. I had, at that point, my father had owned the place for 23 years, and I had 23 years of my father's establishment sitting on my shoulders, my sisters, our well-being, our finance. I just felt so stressed out, and we managed it, and we had a great summer, but I just couldn't go back. So I went and did my master's, and I did my master's in organizational behavior and change and culture. And when back at the University of Guelph, I did it for a year, and then Wolfgang Puck recruited me. And, that's rare, because Wolfgang was only in America. And he's such an icon. I don't know how much you know about him, but he owns Spagos in LA. He is the first person ever he was the first chef to make the kitchen the feature. Wow. He's also very innovative and made the general manager of any restaurant and the head chef partners for profit share. So as a general manager, you had to be able to run the line, and as a head chef, you had to be able to run the floor. And so we were real partners, and that was his philosophy. He also taught me a lot about, that this is not just something you do until you get a real job. This is a vocation, and how to take it seriously. And so, yeah, I was recruited to open Wolfgang Puck in Kuwait, which I did as a woman in a Muslim country with no alcohol, from groundbreaking to ribbon cutting. So that was, I pushed pause on my MBA, and I went out and opened, I trained in Irvine in California, Costa Mesa for 6 months. And then I went out to Kuwait and oversaw the construction of the building. And designed with our chef, helped do the recruitment, and then designed with our chef our menus, which was challenging because a lot of Wolfgang menus have alcohol in their sauces. And of course, we had to find substitutes, and not all of the produce that's readily available in America was available in Kuwait. So trying to find substitutes for those, looking at suppliers, and then recruiting and training. So I worked in Kuwait, which was great, right through to ribbon cutting and operations. And then I had to flee the country in the middle of the night for the fear of the second invasion. And it was literally a midnight flight, and the only flight out was London. So that's how I ended up here.
My God, Debra, you made it sound so simple. My God, I think we could go deeper on this, but there is so many else to cover. But that's fascinating. I mean, from what you learned, I think it looks like it's a destiny. What happened to you in your family's business, you learned the art of how to do it. That kind of prepared you to do a much bigger aspect of launching a wider business in Kuwait. And that, when was this, Debra? Which year was this? In 1990s, is it?
Yeah, 97, 90, 96, 97, whenever the second invasion was. I don't remember exactly. So then I came here for 6 months, but I couldn't get a visa. I couldn't stay. But I was headhunted into Africa and ran 2 resorts in the Gambia, West Africa. So I was their food and beverage director and their deputy general manager for those resorts. And I was there. That was a wild experience as well. And again, learning a lot about culture and rituals and norms and practices for a completely different background and culture within themselves, which was really interesting. And, what they say about Africa, when you go there, it does get under your skin and you kind of always miss it, right? Like there's something beautiful about the people of Africa, and the robustness and the resilience and the need to serve. And I had a great time. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot when I was in Africa as well. I've learned both in both countries. The greatest piece of advice, one of your questions initially was, when we first met was, what's the greatest piece of advice? And one of the greatest pieces of advice I actually got was, you are a visitor. Make no mistake about it. You might be there for years, but you're still a visitor, right? And to respect that. And especially in Kuwait, their norms and practices and rituals are very, very different, specifically for women. And I had to remind myself constantly that there's a lot of things that I disagree with, but it's not my fight to fight. And if the women of Kuwait are happy with the way things are, who am I? That's 200 years, thousands of years of cultural socialization, and little old me's not changing it overnight. And to learn to work with it and to understand it and to appreciate it. And that was true also in Africa.
And from Africa, did you come back again to London, or did you had any other stints?
Yeah, from Africa, I met my husband, who is now my husband, a week before I went to Africa. And we would meet whenever I was on a procurement mission in Germany or England, or and he would fly over to Gambia. And we got pregnant. And 1 in 5 women still die in childbirth in the Gambia, West Africa. And so we really recognized that we needed to get out. So I moved here. We got married, and that was 23 years ago, 20 some odd years ago. So I've been here ever since.
What an entry to the UK.
Yeah, pregnant.
I mean, it's fascinating. I think the way you landed to UK for the first time, it's a story. The way you come back the second time, it's a story. I think everything means it's so interesting. Thank you, Debra, for sharing. So, is that where you entered the FM industry, or did you experiment even more in your life before you entered the FM?
No, I came back. When I was here for 6 months, I had worked for Red Carnation Hotel Group. Right. And I was in their L&D team. And they, very forward thinking, they hired me pregnant and said, listen, we really love what you stand for in your L&D and how you transform the way people see us. And could you come back and run all of our learning and development? At the time, 6 months prior, I had been working for 1 or 2 of their hotels. And now they asked me to do the whole of it in L&D. And so I did that for about a year. One of the agreements was I had to come back 3 months after I had my baby, which was fine-ish. I was in my head, I was like, women in Africa have babies all the time. They have them in fields. They go back to work. It can't be that tough. It was a lot harder than I gave it credit for. So I did go back, and it was, the Red Carnation was ever so gracious, and they were, really worked around me a lot. But ultimately, it just, hotels are 24/7, and young kids don't really feed into that mix as well. So I started my own company. Well, I actually started a company called Live, Love, Learn, and I consulted for organizations. So I worked for GSK. And I helped to bring, and this is my first kind of introduction to outsourcing and FM, and what, I was like, you don't have to work weekends. And the pay was better and the hours were better, and I was doing all the same things. So I was working with GSK on how to bring 14 companies together. So in Brentford, they have their headquarters. They took a very unique and very forward-thinking approach, and they hired companies that were the best at that one thing. So it didn't matter that they did 10 other things. They just wanted that piece of the pie that they were the best at. So a lot of the people in those 14 companies were competitors on other things. So bringing them together was really an interesting concept. And my job was to get them to see a common goal, not to compete for the other pieces of the pie, and to appreciate what everybody brought to the table. So that was kind of my first the foray into that. And then I started to realize that, particularly back then, FM didn't have a lot of service culture in it. You know, you go into a big building, you know, a finance building or a legal building, and there would be a security guard that maybe grunted at you when you walked in the door, right? There wasn't that sense of, you know, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, welcome, the hotel-esque part of service. And so what I really started to do was consult with a lot of blue chip companies in London about how to bring service, people, and culture to the forefront of what they were doing as a true differentiator between them and their biggest competitor. And I did a lot with the C-suite about, you know, everybody had the mission statement, and I'd say, you know, and their values on their wall. And I remember one time I was in the top of this building overlooking London. It was stunning. And I had the most senior people in the organization in this room. I was nervous because, like, what do I know? So I was a bit nervous about how I was going to play this. And I just thought I need to be true to myself. And what do I see as the problem here? So I put up 4 different mission statements that you know, to these people. I said, which one's yours? And they couldn't answer.
Wow.
And I thought, well, there's your problem, because if you're not going to believe in it, why should your team? Why should your customers? Why should the community that you serve? You know, if you don't understand the importance of this and what you're telling the world versus what you're doing behind the scenes, then, you know, that's your first step. It's kind of the base level, right? And so I did a lot of that type of work for many years. And one of the companies I consulted to was Mighty. And Mighty was Mighty's actually an acronym. I don't know if you know that. Many people don't know that. So it stands for Management Incentive Through Investment Equity. So it's a dragon's den of sorts, right? So I was asked to go in to work with Mighty. They were tendering or retendering. They were in situ, and they were retendering for the front of house for a very large bank, very prestigious bank. And the client really wanted a bespoke company that would look specifically at reception, help desk, meeting and event booking, reservations, as part of their holistic service, as, you know, one part of their integrated service. And so I was asked to come in, and they were doing the tender. And I remember, because it was the weekend of Mother's Day. And I came in on Friday and met a couple of people, and there was supposed to be an MD for this new company that they were going to form. And we were all kind of waiting to see what is the vision of this company? Where are you going with this new front of house company? What does it look like? And the person never showed up. Like they just weren't, they didn't come. And we were working till like 2 a.m. There were pizza boxes everywhere, you know. Anyway, I guess around Saturday morning, I just said, okay, right, well, this guy's not coming, whoever he is. And we need to have a direction for this company. And so I wrote in that moment, creating exceptional, memorable experiences, one guest at a time.
Nice.
And I remember typing it and thinking, oh, it's not my problem. Somebody else will have to deliver it, but that's what we're going to stand for. And then the entire thing unraveled around that as the kind of core centerpiece. You know, is it exceptional? Is it memorable? You know, how do we interact with people one guest at a time, make them, you know, personalize the experience, make sure that they feel valued. And so the entire RFP unfolded. And I remember, I think it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning. And I said, I got to go home. Like, this is, you know, I really need to go. And I was being paid as a consultant. I said, but tomorrow morning is Mother's Day, and I'm kind of the guest appearance. So if I'm not in my bed when they come in with the, you know, half-baked eggs and you know, runny eggs and orange juice in the morning, then it's not going to go over well. So I thanked them. I said, best of luck. If there's anything I can do, let me know. And about a week later, I get a call from the guy that brought me in, and he 999, call me back. You got to go. And I was like, what's the 999? And he said, we're through. The client wants to meet the new MD of this company. I'm like, okay, what's wrong? Can't you get a hold of him? And he's like, Deb. And I'm like, do you want me to call somebody, like Canadian? And I'm all like, la, 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 you know, how do I help you? He's like, Jesus Christ, Debra, I want it to be you. And I was like, and I was like, what do you mean you want it to be me? And he's like, you're the right person for this company. You wrote the ethos, you know, you galvanized the team in 48 hours, you know, to put this bid together. I think it should be you. So I went in and we pitched and, you know, and just before we pitched, I said, well, I haven't even seen the rest of the RFP. I only wrote the part that I wrote and, you know, I haven't even seen the rest of it. And so I went down the next day and he gave me like this stack of documents and we were presenting the following day. So I literally stayed up all night to read through it so that I made sure that I, you know, was credible and understood the offer. And I literally hadn't slept. And we went into the client and at the very end of it, the senior client looked at me and said, and you will be the managing director of this company going forward. And I was put on the spot, like I hadn't even, you know, and I just said, of course. And that was, you know, that was how it all started. And then we grew the company around that philosophy. It was really exciting because I had been coaching and counseling other organizations to put their culture first as a differentiator. And for the first time, I really got a chance to put my money where my mouth was. And so our whole company was built on creating exceptional, memorable experiences, one guest at a time.
Totally. What about it? You just started in a single statement and it just took you all the way into an MD of a business, but you were there for some time, 5-6 years, and talk us through your journey all the way from Mighty, please, Debra.
Yeah, I mean, Mighty was such a ride. And, you know, like I said, I then had to pitch the idea to the board. So Mighty's like a dragon's den. So I pitched the idea to the board. They like it. They take 51. It's not done like this anymore, but in that time. So they take 51% of it. And then myself and my team, who I didn't have at that time, it was just me, and a couple of other people who wanted to be involved. We bought into the other 49% of the organization. And what happens is you can invest up until the point of profitability, and then there's no more shares available on the table. So that's what we did. And we started, that first bank that we won was big and, you know, that was great. And then we won Channel 4. And again, that was all about, what made us very unique is it was done all about culture. So, you know, I remember Julie Cortens, who everybody knows, a brilliant leading lady of FM. And I remember her saying, I said, you know, it all comes down to culture. And she crossed her arms and she said, and what do you know about our culture? You know, because we had all turned up in business suits, of course, to be professional. And Channel 4 was jeans and a t-shirt, right? So, you know, and so she was very skeptical about why would we show up that way. She said, what do you know about our culture? And their strap line at the time was what was it? Do it first, make trouble, inspire change. Right? And so I just repeated those words back to her. And she was very impressed that I knew that. And she then asked me to extrapolate on it. And so, you know, Channel 4 was our next big win. And we started to get some real, you know, I always say I have 3 great skills. You know, that's my forte. Number 1, I can create a compelling vision. Number 2, I can hire amazing people. And number 3, I can galvanize people around that vision. Wow. So those are my 3 skills. Like, you know, that's it. That's all I got. But what happened is we were hiring these amazing people and we were creating something that we all wanted to believe in. It was, you know, it was more of a methodology of life that we created. You know, we wanted people. I was really clear about a few things when we started the company. I wanted a company that people jumped out of bed to go to. I wanted it not to be something you do until you get a real job, right? I wanted it to be a vocation. We wanted to give back to society. And I wanted to create lifelong learning in our team members, give them opportunities to grow and expand. And those things really changed how we operated. You know, I didn't, much to my FD's dismay, I didn't focus on the numbers. I focused on creating a great company. The numbers then come. If you focus on your clients and your colleagues, the money follows, right? So yeah, we developed, Revolution Academy, which again had never been done in that industry before. We created amazing incentive programs. We had we had awards every year to acknowledge people in their greatness, because that was the other thing. I really wanted on the spot acknowledgement for people being exceptional and memorable. And so we had a couple of rules. If you accoladed somebody, you always had to use the word exceptional and memorable somewhere in that. If you wrote so we created postcards to write people up. We called it Catching People Doing Something Right. And that's what we did. We caught people doing something right. It's easy to catch people doing something bad. My 2-year-olds can do that. But if you go looking for the good, and you'll find it. And that's so much more rewarding. And we decided that instead of admonishing what wasn't right, we would celebrate what was right, and that would have a gravitational pull for people to do more right things, because they could see what was great and they would want to emulate that. And the people who weren't prepared to do that naturally weeded themselves out.
That's amazing. I think what you just explained, the three attributes that you just talked about yourself, it should be the basic foundational aspect for any leader, which you most of the time you miss it. Just like have a vision, hire the right people, and then galvanize them towards the right vision. It's easy to say, Debra, that's where most companies flip upside down, but I wish they listen to this. And also, I think my T's tagline now is still exceptional every day, I think, which is something
so that's really funny, because we were the black sheep within Mighty, right? Because Mighty was known for engineering and cleaning.
Yeah.
And when we came in, we were creating a 5-star front of house company, which was, Mighty just wasn't known for that at all. So not only were we creating something new, but we were swimming against the stream of perception in the industry about who Mighty was. And I spent my first 2 years trying to change Mighty, right? And I banged my head against the wall, and, it was very frustrating. And I used to get very upset and angry and then I realized, what, I'm done with that. Like I tried to explain why culture and people and service are so important as a differentiator. And I tried to get them to change. And I, was kind of charging windmills all the time. And I gave up, and I just said, what, I just need to focus on my own business. Which was a great gift of Mighty, that they enable you to have that kind of. And what happened over time was, as we started to win more and get more awards and be accoladed and be in the public eye more, Mighty did gravitate towards us a little bit more. So, lots of little things that we did, I started to see get weaved into the larger Mighty. And, they always say that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So.
Perfect. I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And after Mighty, you were at Macro, Condeco, JLL, and recently ISS and Camm Hooper. So talk us through all these roles as well before we move into the other wider contribution to the industry. Thank you.
Okay. So I left Mighty, not because I didn't love what I did. It was a really tough decision to leave. I love my team. I love what we were doing. We were winning awards. But what was also happening is globalization was starting to be the vernacular and the kind of trend in the industry. And Mighty wasn't prepared to leave the UK. I had clients that said, listen, we will help to get you into New York. We will help to get you into Singapore. We want to globalize this service. And Mighty, they just at that time weren't ready. But what was happening is I was losing clients as a result. And I just didn't want to be part of that. If I couldn't make the changes that I saw, I have kind of two things that I believe in about staying with a company. And that's, do I have the power and influence to make the changes I believe need to be made? And if the answer is no, then I need to go, because Yeah, I mean, I just felt like I didn't have the power and influence to make that change. So I went to, I got headhunted. I got my head turned by an amazing global opportunity to run all of the FM for Mix Macro. So the macro division, which is now called Operate. Was really grateful to have that chance. Did a lot of great things globally. We set up all of the America for macro. We reestablished the Europe. We were also able to deliver in Dubai, in the Middle East and Africa. So yeah, we had a great run there, but ultimately I should have listened to my own advice, because the culture was very different. Construction culture is very different from my culture, and there was a disconnect, and nobody's fault. It's just the way that it is, and I felt that it just didn't serve me personally to be in a culture that was different than my own. So at that time, Paul Statham from Condeco, a good friend of mine, he said, listen, Deb, I want to go after some PE money and we want to grow the company, and could you come and help me do that? And so that was, an amazing opportunity to do that. And we did manage to successfully get PE money after he's an entrepreneur. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, really smart guy, and recognized the need in the market at a time that the market was ripe for it. And so I came in, and as any entrepreneur, systems, processes, procedures weren't the strongest, and particularly around people and HR. And so we reestablished we set up the European offer. We set up the American offer a little bit better. And we really did the dog and pony show around how do we go after the PE money, which would help the company to take it to the next level. And, it was supposed to take a year. It took me 14 months, which Paul loves to remind me of. But yeah, we got the PE money. We won the Queen's Award. And then I was offered a role with JLL. So that was great. I said goodbye to Paul. Great company, still believe in Condeco. They're doing amazing things. And it also filled a void, if I'm honest. Like, I think my career choices have been, where am I weakest and how do I bolster that? And tech was kind of one of my weaker areas. And so to lead a prop tech company, a resource company, really gave me a greater insight and understanding into that world. And then also, we were going from a time of being on-premise to SaaS offers, and how do we transition that? And so that was an amazing opportunity to learn and to be part of leading that change. I'm very grateful for that. So I went to JLL, and I got to work with Dr. Marie Poubarot, who leads the human experience. And initially, when I was hired, Neil hired me, and he said, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do with you, but you have skills that I don't have in my existing team. So we'll figure it out along the way. So I bumbled along for a while, which was really a great opportunity. But then we happened on the human experience piece that Dr. Marie Poubarot was part of. And what was really interesting to me was, her research is second to none in the industry. There's just not another R&D company, or actually a property real estate company, that has that amount of R&D and their marketing. Their marketing's brilliant. So but the problem is that human experience was here, and operations is here. And there was a really big disconnect. So it all sounds lovely, if you talk about, achieve ambitions, which is one of the biggest reasons also I went to JLL, is I love their strapline, achieve ambitions. And let me tell you a quick story if I could. So this is the power of a strapline. I think I was my third week in, and I was in a meeting room, and the meeting hadn't started yet. And there's 3 people, and they were talking about the next promotion round. So they do these annual promotion rounds. They decide who should be promoted and, why. But they can only promote so many people, so they have to pick and choose, and, who's most deserving. anyway, so they were discussing it, and I'm the new kid on the block, so what do I know? And about 15 minutes, they're back and forth. And what about so-and-so? Yeah, but this person and that, but and then one of them turned to me and said, Deb, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't know these people. Like, I don't know these people from Adam. How could I possibly even contribute to that conversation? I said, but here's my question. Which one of those three are going to help you achieve your ambitions? And 10 seconds later, they had their answer. And that was the disconnect. Everybody understood achieve ambitions was a strapline, but they didn't understand how to employ it and how to make it work for them and how it could live and breathe in their organization. And the power of that moment has stuck with me for a long time, because it really, in that second, crystallized that I was on the right track around, having that strategic vision and living your life and your values and your decisions and your actions around it. So yeah, I spent a long time working with human experience, which was absolutely brilliant, engage, empower, fulfill. But then how do you translate that? What's the payback? How does that look for the customer? Why would they care? What does it look like for the maid, the engineer, the caterer, creating that bridge between the two. And because I speak ops and I speak strategy, I was able to create that bridge. I understand, what it's like to be on the floor. And I also understood what it was like to create strategy. So I had the best time. GL is a great company. I love their R&D. I love their insights into the industry. I love the way that they are forward thinking. But at that time, Camm Hooper was led by a lovely woman named Claire Lawson. She was the founder of Camm Hooper and sadly was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and asked me to come in and take over her company on her behalf. And of course, that's not something you say no to. And so I did, and I got to enjoy Claire for 6 months, and longer than that, actually. The whole time I was there, I think, just before I was left. And we did great things at Camm Hooper, and I, hired some great people. I got to hire the chef, Ronnie Murray, who is now a celebrity chef. He's on Celebrity Chef, and worked with him to create the menus and create the culture, and had a great team, lovely head of sales called Darren, who was there, again, really dynamic, really interesting, really understood sales processes and systems, and put a great foundation in place. And I guess the culmination of all our work was the Battersea Power Station, which was such a great opportunity. We shouldn't have been playing in that field at all. We were certainly the David and the Goliath story. We were punching way above our weight, but we knew we could do it. We had the heart and the ability and the team to be able to deliver. And as you said in your opening, it was a 25-year contract. It was worth 800 million pounds. And we won it, and we were just absolutely over the moon. And of course, then COVID happened and the whole thing crumbled. So the whole thing's been dismantled. Of course, I no longer had a job, and it was a challenging time. And so I resurrected Live, Love, Learn, and I did some consulting, and I was consulting for about 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. And then I got the opportunity to work with ISS as their global head of transition. So that, ISS is a great, again, really interesting company. I think it's on the cusp of growth, so significant growth. I mean, it's a decent sized company in its own right. They've got a new CEO, new way of operating. They've changed their operating model. I worked with their biggest client, and we opened locations around the globe. Again, had a great time there, and overachieved myself out of a role, unfortunately. But it was a good time. I mean, I delivered 149% of my objectives in 12 months. So they're like, time for change. So I am back to Live, Love, Learn, which I love. I'm doing a lot of coaching with senior executives. I'm doing some consulting as well. And I'm, I love coaching. I am a certified executive coach. So I love to help people and organizations to reach their full potential.
Totally. Thank you so much, Deborah. From where you started all the way as a 14-year-old in your father's kitchen to come all the way here, I think it's a total blessing. I think we will talk about the contribution that you have done to the women at work and women in FM and stuff in part 2. And we'll also get into your hobbies and interests and your charitable philanthropic activities and some random questions. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please do visit www.baachurain.com/Baachu Talk FM podcast. To this specific episode link to everything that was mentioned in this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share Baachu Talk FM podcast. We will see you at the next episode with another special guest. Until then, it's Baachu signing off.